Have you ever stopped to think about what's really being taught in a classroom? Today, we're going to break down a pretty fascinating piece of educational material. See, on the surface, it looks like a totally standard 6th grade English worksheet. But as we're about to find out, it's designed to be so much more than just a lesson on grammar and storytelling.
And it all kicks off with this very simple, very human question. Have you ever been misunderstood? I mean, we've all been there, right? That feeling of frustration when someone just doesn't get what you mean. The lesson uses this universal feeling as its hook to get you connected right from the start.
And that right there is the heart of what we're looking at today. This isn't just about commas and narrators. Nope. It's a carefully crafted journey that's meant to take a student from the technical rules of writing into the much messier world of human understanding and perspective.
So, the first big task is a creative writing prompt. Students are asked to think back to a time they were misunderstood. But, and this is really important, notice that it also asks about a time you misunderstood someone else. Right away, it plants this idea that perspective isn't just about you, it's a two-way street.
Okay, so before you can tell a story, you need the right tools in your toolkit. And the lesson starts with the basics, breaking down one of the most fundamental concepts in all of storytelling: point of view, or POV.
First up, we've got the most personal one, first person. This is when you see the words I or we. The narrator is right there in the middle of the action, and you're seeing everything exclusively through their eyes.
And to make sure the concept sticks, there's a quick little quiz. So you get a sentence like this: we race down the path. That little word, we, it's the dead giveaway. It tells you instantly that the narrator is part of the story. That's classic first person.
Next, the lesson moves on to third person limited. Think of this like a camera that's floating just over one character's shoulder. The narrator uses he or she, and they can tell you the thoughts and feelings of just that one person.
This example shows it perfectly, right? We see something on the outside. Lena smiled. But then we get the inside scoop. She felt proud. We're totally attached to Lena's point of view here. We know what she's thinking, but we have no idea what anyone else is.
And finally, we get to what's basically the God mode of storytelling, third person omniscient. Omniscient literally means all-knowing. This narrator isn't in the story at all. They're floating above it and can dip into the minds and hearts of every single character they want.
See the difference here? It's not just about Lena anymore. We know that both Lena and Troy are watching the door, and we know that both of their hearts are pounding. Getting access to more than one person's inner experience, that's your classic sign of an omniscient narrator.
Okay, so we've got our standard literary toolkit down, and honestly, this is where a lot of English lessons would probably stop. But this one? Oh, it's just getting warmed up, because now we get to see how all of this builds towards something much, much bigger. We're about to see the switch from grammar to morality.
The lesson brings us back to something that feels really familiar: a sentence fix-up. Correct the spelling, add the punctuation. It seems like a simple grammar drill. But look at the sentence itself. It's about a failure to communicate. That's a little clue about where we're headed next.
And right after that simple grammar task, the worksheet makes a hard pivot. It stops asking about the how of writing and starts digging deep into the why. The whole focus shifts from fixing mistakes to thinking about ourselves. This is the bridge. The first big reflection question asks students to connect the dots. How does that literary tool, point of view, actually change how we understand a situation in real life? How does telling a story with I instead of he or she change what feels true? And then, boom! The lesson lays all its cards on the table with this question. It takes that idea of the third-person omniscient narrator and reframes it, not as a writer's trick, but as a moral goal. The all-knowing narrator becomes a blueprint for a divine perspective, one that can actually help us treat each other better.
So what does this God's eye view actually mean, according to this worksheet? Well, it doesn't just leave it as some vague idea. It actually gives students a pretty specific framework to help them understand it.
It's explained in this little passage that draws a really sharp contrast. It says that our limited human view sees what's on the surface, faces, the loud and obvious things. But the divine perspective sees what's underneath, hearts, the quiet intentions. The whole point is to try to move past judging what you see and start trying to understand what you don't.
Now, what's really interesting is that the lesson doesn't just throw out the first-person view.
Actually, it does the opposite. It uses this fun fact to hold it up as something valuable. It points to King David in the Psalms, writing from that raw, honest, I perspective, and says that's what God wanted, the real, messy, personal truth.
And all of this leads to the single most important takeaway of the entire worksheet, the truth to remember. And it's this: the highest form of understanding isn't about knowing everything. It's about having the empathy to hear the intention behind the words. It's about trying to get what people mean, not just what they say.
So you have to ask, why build a 6th grade English lesson this way? Well, this isn't just one creative teacher going off script. It's actually the result of a very specific educational philosophy, one that deliberately weaves academic subjects together with moral teaching.
This whole curriculum comes from a group called HeroesMart Academy, and their core philosophy is that you can't and shouldn't separate education from biblical morality. They actually argue that just giving kids knowledge without a moral compass can be harmful. So their stated goal is to build a spiritual mindset by embedding these ideas directly into all their lessons. And that really brings us to our final thought. We started this journey with a simple grammar exercise, and we ended up with a complete moral framework. It leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on. How does knowing the why behind the lesson, its ultimate goal, change the what that we actually learn from it? Whether it's English or science or history, what happens to education when it's designed not just to shape the mind, but also to shape the soul?